warm welcome to Charcha 2024. My name is Shaili Shah, and I will be your host for this venue for the day. Before we begin, I would like to request all of you to please keep your phones on silent at all times during the sessions. In the attendee kit, you will find the agenda for all the 3 days, and so please be mindful of the timings and locations to ensure that you don't miss any of the sessions. We have 3 venues: Stein Auditorium, Theatre, and Silver Oak. There is a QR code behind the printed agenda. We request you all to please scan that and share your feedback. It's really valuable to us. And if you need any help, feel free to approach one of the volunteers wearing the Charcha t-shirts. We hope that you have a seamless experience, and thank you for being here. Our first session today, co-hosted by HSBC, is Climate and Equity, Pathways for Building Community Resilience. Now, for questions for this session, we will project a QR code, which you can use to send in your questions. So please key in your questions, and we'll pass them on to the moderator, who will then bring them up, time permitting. I would now like to invite Romit Sen, Senior Vice President, Sustainability at HSBC India. Over to you, Romit.
Distinguished invitees, on behalf of HSBC India, I welcome you all to this session, Climate and Equity, Pathways for Building Community Resilience, being organized at this year's Charcha Forum. Each one of us here in the audience today needs no reminder of the impact the changing climate is having on all of us. A few months ago, we witnessed the hottest summer ever reported in India. And as we look at the monsoon, we are seeing a familiar pattern of unusual rainfall trends. Pune is the city where I come from, and in the first 2 months of this year's monsoon, we have seen 200% more rainfall than the normal. So climate change impacts are real, but what is becoming increasingly important is how this impact and affect all of us. We all will agree, and this is perhaps a theme that is central to what we are doing here today as part of our Climate and Equity initiative, is that climate change impacts are disproportionately more for a certain section of the population. At HSBC India, we are working with our partners, and we are delighted to have many of them here today. We have Pat, we have Mr. Bhatt, and others. We are working with them. We have WWF, who's been one of our longest standing partners in our journey. We are demonstrating solutions that help build community resilience, and at the same time, conserve our natural resources and help improve livelihoods. Today, we are delighted to be speaking about our engagement, and I call upon Aloka Majumdar, Managing Director, Global Head of Philanthropy, HSBC, and Head of Sustainability, HSBC India, to share our approach to climate and equity. Aloka.
Thank you, Romit. So very good morning to everyone, and a warm welcome to everyone who's here today. Like Romit said, a lot of known faces and some new faces, of course, we want to know during the course of the day. Of course, a big thank you to Shri Faiz Ahmed Kidwai, who's made time to come be with us here at this event. So I'll be very brief because, today what we have is we'll hear from Mr. Kidwai, we'll do the report launch, and of course we have a panel where there's going to be a lot of honest conversation in terms of, about the problem and where we are, because this is not an easy topic that we are talking about today. But very quickly, in terms of, Romit mentioned the fact that, the climate change impacts are real. I think the one thing that we have been witnessing over the past decade is the fact that it's very complex. It's just not about being real. It's very complex. The scale is huge. So therefore, there is a huge need for being collaborative. I think one of the things that we've realized in our work is that this is one issue that you cannot work in an isolated manner. It has to be a collaboration, and I know that many of you are working in this space as well, and how we bring that together. And I think these are convenings where we get to know each other and the work that we do, so that the collaboration piece is at the heart of of what we want to do when we are working with climate. In terms of, what is our approach, you must be wondering that, what is in it for HSBC to be part of this entire? Why is climate and equity important for HSBC? So, as a financial institution, we work towards economic growth. I mean, that's the first thing that we look at. But the fact is, when we are talking, and this economic growth is going to be at the center of everything. We know that, you have a very aspirational population for us in a country, and that economic growth should be at the core of it. But when we are talking about economic growth, it's just not for a particular section. It has to be much more inclusive and taking into account the base of the pyramid as well. And when we are talking about businesses today, when we are talking about growth today, we are all incorporating ESG and the climate considerations in the decisions that we are making. So importantly, when we are making decisions also for the base of the pyramid or climate-related programs for the base of the pyramid, we've often seen that it's again being done with a top-down approach. And it's not necessarily that we're getting the people who are actually facing this, their considerations are being debated or taken into account when you're working on a solution. And so one of the big things that we are going to hear today from our panelists, and these are the questions that we would like to hear from you in terms of how we kind of build that kind of collaboration. Do you think that we're at a stage we are getting the voice of the vulnerables already incorporated in the solutions that we are working on? So these are some of the discussions that we would look forward to. I think in terms of the three things, because largely we have the philanthropies here, and one of the things that we believe that India is a very unique country where we have a very large amount of funds available with us for the CSR through the CSR grants, and it can be catalytic as well. I think that's something that we need to kind of work on in terms of some bit of it. Mr. Kidwai is something that we want to work with the government to see that how the CSR grants could be catalytic in driving solutions, in creating proof of concepts, in creating demonstration projects, and also, of course, drive collaboration. So that's something that we are looking at. Before I hand over, I'm going to keep it very brief. One of the things I thought that I should highlight is that when each of us are working in this, in the climate space, etc., we have to be. This is one piece we never speak about. Because, whenever you're talking about philanthropy fund, when you're talking about any CSR program, it's all. I think we as CSR professionals, we don't go back to our boards to say that, for example, I'm in a financial institution. We are in the business of risk. So therefore, these are also development programs that's there. So therefore, risk should be a very big factor that we as a collective, I think we need to kind of consider and also call it out when we are working on developing any such programs. Of course, today, like I mentioned, we have a very large group of practitioners and experts here. And they've actually also done a huge amount of work, even on ground. So we'll hear from them. And without further ado, I will, of course, now invite Romit for the next proceedings. I think you have a report launch. The report is an interesting one, and I'm going on talking. I have to make this point. It was interesting when I went through the report. It basically said, and Anant is here, who's an author, and Rishabh, who's the co-author here. And adaptation financing has come up as the big gap when we spoke about this report. Interestingly, data suggests that globally there is huge gap in adaptation financing. But interestingly, India is better off. Because India, you have the government schemes. If you see Manrega, if you see the other schemes, it's actually integrated. Adaptation financing is actually integrated in many of the schemes that we are doing. And it's actually very encouraging to see that, the economic survey this time had a special mention of climate, which was also very encouraging to see. So some very scattered thoughts from my end, but looking forward to, discussions and hearing from the experts. And now I hand over. I think you continue with the slides, and we will go ahead with the proceedings so that we can finish this on time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Aloka. We will be releasing our report, but we thought it is important for the audience here to have a little snapshot of how did we go about doing this research, what have been some of the findings, and more importantly, how do these findings situate or contextualize within the whole landscape that we are talking about. I'll call upon Rishabh Tomar, who's Senior Manager at the Britspan Group. Rishabh has been an author along with the Britspan team to make a quick summary of the report and its findings. Rishabh.
Thank you, Romit and Aloka, and good morning to everybody, and thank you for attending this session. I will briefly hit upon the report that Britspan, along with the support of HSBC and UMW, conceptualized and executed. So as Aloka mentioned, the idea of this work is to highlight the voice of the vulnerable communities. The specific community we focused on this year was marginal farmers. Marginal farmers constitute about 100 million in numbers in India, and they own less than 1 hectare of land. So they are the backbone of, hope everything is okay. So they are the backbone of the rural agrarian economy in India. And it is imperative for us as a nation to ensure that they are being supported and their climate resilience is built to ensure their adaptation to the changing climate in this world. So with that, we essentially did a survey of about 950 marginal farmers and agricultural laborers, along with in-depth interviews and field visits. All this to understand how does climate change manifest in their day-to-day lives, and what can be some solutions or promising interventions that we can support to ensure their climate adaptation. So this was done across 4 states to ensure a diversity of different agroecological zones, different crops grown, different types of climate hazards faced. And then I think the overall kind of synthesis of the research insights was that farming is becoming increasingly riskier and increasingly hard for marginal farmers. One farmer that we talked to in rural Karnataka highlighted that it has become like a gamble, where at the start of the season, they put in all their money, effort, and all the work that goes into the cropping season. But at the end of the day, there is no surety or guarantee that the yield will come and the income will come. And this is not just that individual farmer talking about their own personal kind of grievances. In the survey that we did, 98%, which is approximately all the farmers we talked to, highlighted that they have faced a climate hazard in the last 10 years. This just goes to show how pervasive and how severe the climate threat is, and how it is currently impacted our marginal farmers. And the climate manifests as a direct risk to the life and livelihoods of farmers. In our survey, we also found that only 16% of farmers are able to earn enough to cover their household expenses and save. And this, coupled with the fact that there is a lot of existing vulnerabilities that these farmers face in terms of fragile finances, in terms of limited social capital, as well as limited formal and informal support systems they have, this further exacerbates their vulnerabilities. This is even pronounced for marginalized groups such as Dalit farmers or Adivasi farmers or women farmers, because they have even less ability to cope. So this further enhances their vulnerability. And the climate change is not just an economic impact on the life of the farmer. It impacts all facets of human development. So it impacts the food and nutrition security they have. It impacts their health concerns, as well as other developmental factors. One interesting example that we came across is if the yield or the income from the particular season is down, one of the negative coping strategies that farmers use is to pull the girl child out of the school. And this undoes years of work done by the government, by civil society, and essentially what we have come to this realization that climate is a cross-cutting need across all SDGs. And in order to ensure progress against SDGs and ensure holistic development of this country, it is important to focus on climate and ensure adaptation of these farmers. As Aloka mentioned, that one of the key challenges is the gap in adaptation finances. Farmer welfare and climate adaptation is a key priority for the government as well, as Aloka highlighted. There are multiple schemes which significant budgets and resources allotted under different ministries that look at these issue areas. However, given the need and the severity is so high, and one estimate suggests that 250 billion would be needed in India from 2015 to 2030, it is pretty clear that not a single source of capital or a single actor can fulfill this need on their own. And hence, there is a need for different actors and different capital sources to converge and blend together to fulfill this need. And it is in this context that we feel that philanthropists and impact investors have a unique role to play, and they can unlock additional capital through their catalytical capital that they put in at the start. We estimate that the initial catalytic capital they put can unlock up to 10 times more capital from different commercial as well as government sources. One other thing that we came across in the research that we did was the perception that there are limited or there aren't many good solutions or effective solutions that philanthropists and impact investors cite as the reason of not investing in these kind of solutions. And that is one myth we wanted to kind of bust through this report. So if there's one takeaway I would kind of like to leave you all with if you go out of this room, is that there are existing solutions, promising interventions that can and are currently impacting farmers and enabling their climate adaptation. And some of these we've highlighted in the report as bold bets. So I'll quickly talk about like the approach for the bold bets. So we assume there's 100 crores of capital, let's say with somebody, a philanthropist or an impact investor, and that is the money they can put as catalytical capital. Then the other big thing was, as Aloka mentioned, was the voice of the community. So that became our starting point. Through the survey and interviews, we asked the community members, what is the kind of support and resources that you need? And based on that, we prioritized these 6 solutions. And then for each solution, we identified what is the role that philanthropists or an impact investor can play in this. And that initial role or initial kind of catalytical impact by them would lead to unlocking of more capital by government sources or commercial capital. So for instance, in the first solution that you see on the screen, currently the burden and the risk of transitioning to natural farming is put on the farmer. And that is a severe shortcoming of how the current system is set up. And one way to overcome that is for philanthropists and impact investors to provide initial money or initial support to the farmer to transition to natural farming. This could be in form of supply of inputs, capacity building, as well as providing that fund to transition due to the lack of generated income in the first few crop cycles or the drop in productivity. So that's one way impact investors or philanthropists can help. The other one is essentially commercial debt is seen as a key lever for scale. And there is PSL mandates for banks to lend to small farmers. But a lot of banks currently find it challenging to do. The reason being there is a lot of risk of default that banks feel that there is. This is driven by the lack of data around the financial profile of the farmer, lack of loan recovery mechanisms that there is currently, and this ultimately leads to just banks not kind of giving enough directly to farmers. And the one way to kind of solve this is if philanthropy can cover the risk of these loan defaults. This will ultimately lead to more commercial capital coming into the farmers and helping them solve some of the challenges. And these loans from banks through the farmer collectives could be used for water conservation efforts as well as building livestock infrastructure in the communities. I started my presentation by highlighting the fact that farming has become more riskier. It is a gamble, as seen by many. And one way to tackle that is through insurance. However, currently the way insurance is set up and delivered in India is a bit ineffective for the marginal farmers. The reason is that currently insurance claims take a lot of time for processing, as well as there's limited kind of data around the starting point as well, in terms of identifying the needs as well as the insurance premiums and all that. Additionally, land is seen as eligibility criteria in a lot of these scenarios. So this just leaves a lot of, a big chunk of the marginal farmers out of the equation altogether. One turnaround for this is essentially having weather-indexed wage loss microinsurance. And what I mean by that is essentially have an insurance that is automatically triggered when a certain climatic condition is hit. So for instance, you can have a threshold for the minimum level of temperature or minimum level of rainfall. And when that level is hit, the payout is automatically done to the farmer for that particular region. This is again very important and very relevant for the agricultural laborers, because they are the ones who get hit by the most if there's a natural calamity, their daily wage goes away, and then this compensates for that loss of livelihood. So across the bold bets, what we estimated is that the catalytical capital by impact investors and philanthropists can ultimately unlock about 45 billion additional capital from existing government sources through different schemes and programs, as well as commercial capital from banks and MFIs. And this catalytical investment can be in different forms, as Aloka also alluded to. It could be in form of spurring innovation, to build in evidence, to cover the risk of some of these loans, as well as building an overarching enabling ecosystem. So to close off, I would just say that the climate threat is right in front of us, but so are the solutions. And it is kind of up to us and all of us in this room to come together and work collaboratively with each other to support the marginal farmers that we all depend on our livelihoods for and our life for. So thank you, and with that, I'll invite you.
Thank you, Rishabh. There's been a lot of efforts that has gone from all of us, and we are delighted that we are at that stage where we will now release the report. Can I request Shri Faiz Ahmed Kidwai, Additional Secretary, Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, to come on stage and release the report? Can I request the Britspan team and my colleague Pracheta to get the report? We'll also request Aloka, if you could come here, Anant from the Britspan Group, and we also have George Aikara, who's the CEO of United Way Mumbai. United Way Mumbai, Britspan and HSBC, this is a partnership which program that we launched 2 years ago, and the report is part of that program. So we'll request you to kindly release the report. Yeah, can we have the report, please? Thank you, everyone. We'll now invite Shri Kidwai to deliver the special address.
Aloka Majumdar ji, Romit, the whole team from HSBC, your partner organizations who have worked on this, and ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by congratulating HSBC by thinking about farmers, especially the small and marginal farmers who constitute almost 86 to 87% of our farming community and are at the most risk. When you started with risk, so this is, I think, the riskiest business which they are in. And this is a business where season after season they put in everything they have. In fact, beyond that, most of it is on loans. And it is a business where you do not know what you're going to produce and what the climate is going to be, and ultimately how do you fare. Still they do it, and they've been doing it for generations, and we all have been benefiting out of it. But overall, since the last few decades, the climate risk has increased, and we have studies. I'll share some data with you. We did a survey through ICAR, our Institute of Agriculture Research. They have identified about 310 districts across the country which are at a very high risk due to climate change. And we have been running programs, but if we talk of business as usual, you see each year the country is affected by droughts, floods, cyclones, hailstorms, frosts, and other climatic events. So far, the temperature increase in India has been 0.68 degrees. And if it is business as usual, we all know there's going to be a pronounced warming in future, which means increased floods, decrease in winter precipitation, and a lower number of rainy days. What the results which will happen because of this increase in temperature and carbon dioxide and decrease in water availability will be first rain-fed rice. Almost 50% of our sown area is rain-fed. We do not have assured irrigation. So the rice yields are going to reduce by about 20% and by 2050 and 47% by 2080 if we continue as business as usual. The irrigated rice yield is going to reduce by about 4% by 2050 and by 5% by 2080. When we come to wheat, the estimated reduction is about 19% by 2050 and 40% by 2080. When we talk of maize, the reduction is in the range of 18 to 23%. Then if you talk of vegetables, they are severely affected. The vegetable crops reduction is in the range of 5 to 15%. And it does not end with only cereals and vegetables and crops. It goes on to animals also. The heat distress in animals reduces the production level. It reduces the weight of the poultry. It reduces egg production. It reduces, in fact, the water bodies are affected, the pisciculture, the fisheries are affected. And in 2018, we estimated this annual loss to be around $9 to $10 billion. This is the kind of scenario which we are looking at. And the small farmer is the one who's most impacted by this. Now, what we are doing at the government, I will just tell you some of the initiatives which have been taken. In 2009, something known as a National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture was launched, which had several components. One was ensuring assured irrigation through the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. Then we came up with insurance. You all must have heard of the Fasal Bima Yojana, which is constantly increasing, and it is right now it is only covering the production losses. But the losses which you have spoken of, the weather-based risk insurance which is to be covered, that is also being thought of at the moment, and it's a good suggestion which you have given. Soil health cards was another initiative. So most of you would have known that more than 20 crore soil health cards have been made and issued, but the challenge is to use them properly. Then promotion of natural farming through Parampragat Krishi Vikas Yojana was another thing which happened. Crop weather advisories. Now we have apps which tell farmers the seasonal advisory, there is a weekly advisory, there is a monthly advisory, then there are advisories on any major event which is going to happen. These are available to farmers on an app. These are the things which are there, but still looking at the challenge which we are facing, I think we need to do much more. Some of the things which we have planned, which we are doing, one is there was a project called NICRA, which is National Innovatives on Climate Resilient Agriculture. This was a project which was started by ICAR in these 310 districts. Basically, what it envisaged was that we make the farming climate resilient, which means giving them seeds which are either drought resistant or flood resistant or heat tolerant, things like that, using seeds. Then giving them the technologies to make them to understand the impact of climate and to face it, and also to cover their vulnerabilities. So it will not be all eggs in a basket. It will not be you're dependent only on farming, but to diversify, to get into livestock, to get into other such activities which help you whenever there is a climatic event. So that has worked well, but the idea was that this will spread. Now we are coming up with a program on climate resilient agriculture, and we plan to take up 50,000 villages over a 5-year period. And the idea is that these act as lighthouse villages where these technologies are implemented irrigation, the water use efficiency is in fact, not only water use, but all input use efficiencies are enhanced, be it water, be it fertilizers, be it any other input which goes into farming. Those efficiencies are enhanced. And there is a convergence approach of all schemes, so that you spoke of Manrega, there are many such schemes which are there. So the village becomes a climate resilient village, which can adapt to the changes in climate, and with minimum losses in production and productivity. And other villages then learn from it, and this spreads. But I think the magnitude of the problem will not be solved by government alone. The effort which you are making today is to get the philanthropies into it, to get other players into it. I think that will help. If we can work together on such projects, it will be a very good initiative. The government is also coming up with a program on, you must have heard the budget announcement, to make 1 crore farmers adopt natural farming, and to open about 10,000 bioresource input centers, which was recently announced by the finance minister in the budget. The idea is that natural farming is one way to cope with climate change, where you have multiple options instead of going for monoculture, and the input costs is much less than the traditional systems of farming which we adopt. So that is another program which the government of India is launching. The third thing which we are doing is we are being a signatory of all the climate protocols which are there. We have still, agriculture comes under the voluntary sector as far as India is concerned. So we are making a framework on this. We are building a registry on this, because there is a huge potential in this, not only within the country but globally also, which is going to be there for some time now, and we plan to tap that in an organized manner, so that farmers get the maximum benefit out of this. And also adaptation financing becomes a part of this initiative. These are the few things which we are doing. I think the biggest challenge in a country of the size of India is, if you think our land holdings are very small, the number of farmers are the largest in the world. So to reach out to such a huge number with the most diverse farming activities, the most diverse farmers anywhere in the world you can see in India. So that is the challenge, to reach out to them, to make them understand the vulnerabilities which are there, and to ensure that they adopt it. I'll give you a small example. I think 2 years back we had a heat distress, and the wheat production reduced by about the estimates was from 15 to 25%. So at that time a study was done that how many farmers have after that, recently we came up with this report, how many farmers have adopted climate resilient wheat seeds, and the result was very encouraging. So that impact resulted in about close to 70 to 80% farmers now going for seeds which are resilient to heat, which is a very encouraging sign. So I think the challenge and also the biggest opportunity is to get across to the farmers, let them know, and when we work together, I think it's possible. So congratulations once again for this report. And in this report, you have also in your 6 recommendations, there's a lot on farmer producer organizations. So I look after that program in the ministry. We, under the 10,000 FPO program, we have constituted close to 9,000 FPOs, and we have about 20,000 FPOs earlier. That's a huge opportunity which we can leverage on, and we can ensure that the program delivers whatever it has set out to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. You are from Madhya Pradesh, cadre, and we have some interesting examples on what you spoke about in Sidhi. I know you have been Collector Rewa. So we'll take this opportunity to come and share some of the examples. Can I now request, sir, if you could just come on stage and Aloka to present a memento to Shri Faiz Ahmed Kidwai. So I'm sure you would have, seen or heard about the HSBC lion. This is one of the lions whose name is Stephen. Yes. Thank you. So we have heard, we now have an interesting set of conversations with practitioners and experts. I would call upon our panelists, Dr. Sejal, Worah, Program Director, WWF India, Mr. Arindom Datta, Senior Advisor, Omnivore, Aparna Dua, Director, the Blended Finance Company, Shivani Gupta, Co-CEO and Program Director, Womanity, and of course, Anant Bhagwati, who will be the moderator for this session. Over to you, Anant. No. Over to you. I'm basically out of the screenshot.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Shri Kidwai, and very inspiring. And in some ways, I'm really excited to chat a little bit. And I'm going to dive straight in because this group, obviously, many of you already know this group, but I'm hoping we can build on both what, Sir said, but also I think a little bit of how HSBC is framing this. I'm going to start with you, Sejal, and a little bit on maybe an obvious question, which is unfortunately not thought of deeply enough. What is the meaning of vulnerability as we think of, farming, especially smallholders, and why should it be thought of in a deep manner? Could you just bring it to life a little bit for us? What does that really mean in your work? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Pleasure to be here, and great to see such a diverse audience. I'm sure we'll have a very interesting interaction also with my fellow panelists. So I represent, in a way, I work with a civil society organization. We work on environmental conservation. And in that aspect, we work with farmers who are probably some of the most vulnerable in this country, because we work with farmers right on the edge of forests. And these are often the ones that are, not seen, heard. And as Shri Kidwai said, they face unimaginable risks every day of their lives in the farming practices that they do. So we've seen this firsthand in terms of the vulnerability of these farmers and the kind of pressures they face. When we started working, and what we work on really is the environmental aspect of farming. So nature-based farming, natural farming, whatever you call it, there's so much terminology these days that you can't keep up with it, is something we work on. But one of the things that we've discovered, and it's kind of an obvious thing, is that unless you address the systems, the natural systems that are supporting farming, economic development, livelihood development, it's all good, but it's not going to be sustained because nature is at the basis of all of this. So I think working at that level and working with actually ensuring that your natural systems are intact and your natural systems are supporting farming is critically important. Unfortunately, a lot of this is not measurable. A lot of this is not actually quantifiable. And therefore, a lot of it is also not fundable. So this is the challenge in terms of working with vulnerable farmers. Farmers understand their systems well. And I was just talking to my colleague Suresh before coming to this meeting. And he was describing a scenario which was very interesting. When we started working with farmers in Karnataka on management of their water resources, so management of the wetlands, management of the rivers, and we chose a group of farmers to work with, they were the ones who said, don't start with us. Start with the upstream farmers. Because unless you've actually looked at the whole system, there's no point in working with us. So it was very interesting that they themselves, being vulnerable, were telling us to go away and work with another set of farmers because they saw the big picture, which often we don't. And this is why it's so important, and that is why this report is so important in saying, listen to the voice of the people on the ground, because they understand what's going on much more than you. I want to just give one more example, because I'm now a farmer myself. I've kind of transitioned to becoming a farmer. And when I first bought the land that I was going to farm on. It was agricultural land. There were farmers already there. It was a bunch of, old brothers, 6 or 7 of them, who were selling their land. And I was feeling really bad because, I felt like I was pushing them out. They were not capable of farming anymore, very marginal area in Uttarakhand at 8,000 feet. Their children were not interested in farming. They had all moved to the cities. So they had no choice but to sell the land. So I was talking to them and saying, Uncle, I'm really going to look after your land, don't worry. Because I wanted to do organic farming, I wanted to bring back, organic horticulture, etc. And they looked at me and they said, good luck to you. Because, and why, this is very interesting. He said, because we have poisoned the land. He actually said that. They said, we have actually, over the years, what we have done to this land is terrible. We have completely poisoned it. If you can turn it around, good luck to you. And I hope you can do that. And this is where the whole natural farming, comes in, which is something that we work on quite a lot. Because, we have actually done this. And we need to now turn it around. It's not going to be an easy task. But, I saw that natural farming is one of your 6 big bets. And I do believe that this is a really important one that we need to turn on. And this is where I think your marginal farmers and your vulnerable farmers are going to be benefited the most. I have a lot more to say, but I'll stop here and let others speak. Thanks.
Yeah. No, thanks, Sejal. And it's exciting to see this new avatar of yours as a farmer. I think one thing which you said, which is, and in one of our visits, we encountered this lady farmer called Tutumoni Deka from Assam. And she said something very powerful. I mean, she, in some ways, was actually an entrepreneur. Very simply put, in her mind, she's not vulnerable. She's an entrepreneur who's taking fairly interesting bets. And, I'd love to come, Shivani, to you a little bit, because part of, the civil society, philanthropy, I mean, thinking of the entity as a victim versus thinking of the entity as actually the entrepreneur who's driving some of the things, maybe at the heart of like what Kidwai sir is also saying. So Shivani, weigh in a little bit again on the topic of the why.
So hi, I'm Shivani and I work on specifically on gender and women as they relate to land. So they can be farmers, they can be forest dwellers and fisherwomen, etc. And the whole idea is how do you secure their livelihoods and beyond? Because for a lot of women, association with land is more than livelihoods. It's about their dignity, it's about their identity. But coming to why we should listen to them is because they know it, right? It's been their knowledge systems for centuries. It's just that probably they're not recognized as the right knowledge systems as in they're not written, they're passed orally, so they're not recognized as knowledge system. I think the other thing is like Sejal ma'am rightly said, that for them it's a lived reality. They know that वो नदी इधर से नहीं उधर से जा रही है. वो first जब होली होती थी तो ये हो जाता था और अब नहीं होता है. So they can really figure out what is happening, and a lot of this knowledge actually sits with the women and the elder in the community. And as we know now, there is increased feminization of agriculture. So how do you equip women to learn about all this, but also retain it, get access to government schemes, for which land title, as mentioned in the report also, is a key thing. So how do you address issues like, access to the insurance scheme? Because the name of the land is actually not even in the husband's name. It's 2 generations before some grandfather's name. And the holding has come down so much because it's less than a hectare, of course, but sometimes it's not even enough to sustain one portion of the family. So can we think of mechanisms, or can they think of mechanisms where title and farming is related but not dependent? As in, just because you're farming, you're not the owner of it. So we have to come up with mechanisms where I would say that small holdings can have increased productivity in some shape or form, Of course, using natural farming is one piece of it, but how do you collate the land holdings to be more productive is one way of this. And for that, you'll have to go, we believe we'll have to go through the local institutions. Because a Gram Sabha on a, on a village in the edge could be that mechanism. We don't know. Could be that mechanism. But those are the kind of things that we'll have to work very closely with and get a consensus and retain. So those are the two reasons I would think we should listen to the community.
Thanks, Shivani. Building on, I think, and the big theme I heard is letting go of control, because in some ways, the person who actually has the answer, actually has the biggest incentive to make it work, is the furthest from this room. So if I could turn it around, bring you in a little, and you obviously have had multiple hats around multiple financial institutions, but also you know how LPs think, you know how financial institutions think. Decode a little bit on why it is hard to actually do what we are discussing. And if I was to paraphrase, what is it that we are discussing? We are discussing a sharp articulation of the problem, but being flexible around the solutioning. Sejal mentioned, some of this may not be, you may not have a log flame right in the beginning. That doesn't mean the problem is not important. That may not mean the solution is not there. It just means the discovery will happen. So bring this to light a little bit from your multiple conversations inside multiple doors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me start with a small anecdote. I mean, when I started my professional career 32 years back, I was working with NABARD at Patna. And in the first conference around smallholder farmers and agriculture, I heard exactly the same points that are being made. But the focus was more on access to finance, access to inputs, and the markets. Things have got worse. As you said, the size of the landholder has become smaller, and now the climate issue has come in. So that means what I heard 32 years back, possibly it was there 60 years back, I'm sure it was, but now it's got exacerbated a lot more. So we are looking at a crisis. Now looking at financial institutions, I think with all the moves that the central bank and the government of India has made over the last 40, 50 years, it's been phenomenal in terms of policy and in terms of regulation in trying to nudge the financial institutions to increase the exposure to rural and agri. I mean, I won't go through the slew of, different kind of detailed circulars and instructions which have come out both from the ministry and from RBI. But having said that, and the plethora of financial institutions we have, from the commercial banks, RRBs, the cooperative, long-term structures, short-term structures, the MFIs, NBFCs, etc., the pain point remains, the elephant in the room. A smallholder farmer, and I'm saying it with a lot of responsibility, is not a financially viable borrower. And why? Is because of the different risks that we spoke of. The kind of risk that a smallholder farmer faces is just immense. It's not that financial institutions in India have not tried. Now, let's not talk about the issue. What could be the potential solutions and what needs to be done to have them? One is de-risking the farmers to make that business viable. Now, how it's very, very tough. Because the simple answer to the point you made, give a choice to all the farmers we have in India, the smallholder farmers, 105 million, that would you like to continue with farming, or if you're assured of a 50,000, 1 lakh salary or doing anything else, trust me, the answer is not going to be very, very pleasant for all of us, right? Now, from a banking perspective, something was hinted by Aloka and somebody else was, how do you get the philanthropic sector, the public sector, including the government and the private sector to come together? And Aparna will talk more about that. What is blending not only the effort or the capital together to de-risk, to build up, creative financing structures. Again, with all responsibility, I'm saying that would be a start, but there's not enough capital to mingle to make blended finance structures. It will just show the way, but unless it gets commercialized, mainstreamed, these will all remember nice, beautiful examples. That's one. Again, the problem is we are talking of 4 different silos. the research institutions, the government, the development sector, the private sector, they don't talk to each other. They don't have the ability to talk to each other to bring about meaningful blending of effort and capital together. It doesn't happen. And it's not an India problem, it's a global problem. Europe does it better, but in India, we have not been able to do it. So unless that blending of thought and effort comes in together, we are not going to see the results. The third point I would like to make, that we are talking of food security, nutrition security. Climate is not only hitting the farmers, it's going to hit the food and nutrition security of a country of 145 billion people. Now, not 145 billion, how many? 1.45 billion. So now, we as consumers, we are a very, very important stakeholders, and all of us do not put the necessary effort to see the origin of the food, which is so important for us as to how the supply chain looks and how the farmers are faring. And we don't put in the effort and the pressure to different financial institutions, to policymakers to be able to create the right kind of environment to allow for financial instruments, because banks alone, they cannot do anything. Trust me. I mean, that's the sorry answer. Retail banking, if you go by the risk modeling that they do for retail financing, smallholder farmers, they're financing just because of priority sector norms. You take away priority sector norms, the financing to smallholder farmers will collapse. So two things: physical aggregation of farmers, the FP or FPC model. Again, it needs to be done selectively, creatively, only when the power of aggregation works, where aggregation makes sense. Just to aggregate farmers, just because there's a grant available for a NGO to aggregate farmers, doesn't work. We'll look at another disaster like the cooperatives. The second is the virtual integration of farmers using technology. That's not the subject to be discussed now. But using all modern technology, a lot is going into building up the agri stack. But the moment from the farmers to the consumers, everybody can make a choice based on dynamic decisions that we get from data points which are trustworthy, that the supply chain should improve.
If you were to think of, now push it into the art of the possible also, we heard three things from Mr. Kidwai. We heard a little bit on what the government is doing, and there is openness. Arindom and other panelists spoke a little bit about how the silos exist, and the silos are solving for different incentives. In some ways, it feels like it's an incentive misalignment issue, both on time horizon and what is actually success. So if you were to think of this as a classic issue to solve over the next 30 years, what would be one or two things you feel is holding it back? I feel all the four silos are represented in the room, but also are there one or two things which give you hope or excitement about the future?
No, thanks for that, Anant. And I think some fantastic points have already been made, so I'm not going to obviously go down and try and repeat them. But I think the one thing, or maybe two, that I will highlight, I think, which is critical and sort of it's a good segue into the question that you've asked as well, is the four silos or the trilinguality is how we think about it, right? How do you actually bring civil society, government, and capital allocators, if I can broadly classify them, but between that also, I mean, there will be, development sector actors and commercial sector actors. So how do you actually speak the language? And that's, part of what we're trying to do at the blended finance company as well, is to understand from each stakeholder what the priorities are, and how do you really balance out the risk-return profile. I mean, Arindom again, touched upon that smallholder farmers, or as Rishabh mentioned in his opening remarks as well, or Kidwai sir mentioned as well, Aloka mentioned. I mean, we are talking about smallholder farmers, marginal farmers. So they're not typically the profile of who a bank or an NBFC today is lending to. So are there mechanisms that are possible that can actually start to improve the risk-return profile so that they become more bankable? So the trilinguality aspect, or bringing the four silos together, is an important one. And then, though it seems obvious, Anant, and you called this out, I don't think it's being talked about enough. You are talking about customers at the end of the day. I might be designing an insurance, I might be designing a loan product. It's for the customer. So if I'm not incorporating their voice, I can create product after product. It's just going to gather rust. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to have the kind of uptake or productivity that it's designed for. So both these aspects become very critical as we start thinking about product design. And now let me come to that. I think as making a note as Rishabh was talking about the 6 bets which have been mentioned as part of the report as well. And we are working on 3-4 of those ideas today already, whether it's looking at how do you support smallholder farmers to transition to more climate smart practices or natural farming. There is a requirement for a transition fund, as that was mentioned, right? So can you actually link that to outcomes so that, again, you're supporting the farmers with the right capacity building and technical assistance, but also the finance that is required today in helping them transition, and not just doing that, for 1 year out or 2 year out, over time, as Dr. Worah also mentioned. The soil today is poisoned, right? So you're not going to see these outcomes over 2 to 3 years, but this will have to be a longer term, 5 to 7 journey. We've seen examples of this happen in AP with the ZBNF program as well, where it's taken them almost 9 to 10 years to get about 1 million farmers to transition to natural farming. So that is one. The other is, today you have the voluntary carbon markets, and hopefully with the regulations coming in, and that's another way to actually leverage and bring in more or different type of capital and incentives. Again, thinking of almost like an outcome fund model that can support farmers to transition to more climate smart practices, whether it's alternative wet and drying techniques or others if you're talking about paddy or wheat. And different crops, different geographies will require different mechanism. I'm not the agri expert in the room, but how can finance really play the role of helping them transition is something that we're thinking about. We talked about insurance. So the weather index product that was talked about is parametric insurance. And so you mentioned that now the government's also thinking about it. It's definitely the need of the hour, because with the unpredictability and the increasing frequency of such climate events, not only providing income security or resilience to farmers, parametric insurance plays an important role there. But also we are seeing products built around heat insurance. We've seen that happen in Gujarat, so that when daily wage laborers are going out and temperatures are soaring above 45 degrees Celsius, you're actually putting your health at risk. So can parametric insurance then kick in? So actually, your wage for that particular day or 2 days, whenever you're seeing the incidence of such high, weather in a given, or high temperatures in a given city, you're actually protecting against, protecting marginalized communities against that. So we are, as Anant you mentioned, designing a lot of these, instruments. But again, it requires working very closely with the government, with philanthropy, to actually come in and take on some of the early risk, and then gradually kind of build this to be a more market-based mechanism, because Arindom already touched upon this. If it's not grounded in market realities, this is going to just become another beautiful example that we talk about, but it's not really going to scale up till commercial capital really comes in, and that's where I think blended finance, or the beauty of that, is really unlocked. There are other examples. Talked about FPOs as well. How do you actually facilitate not just low-cost credit, but also quicker access to credit? But before getting to that, there's actually the entire phase of capacity building for FPOs that's also required. So happy to get into many more details, but I know we're almost out of time.
Yeah, exciting. In some ways, we are hoping some of these do take shape, and you have a role to play there. I have been given my marching orders, but before that, I'm going to do a rapid fire round, and I'm also taking some questions which has been given to me on the technology platform right in front of me. Markets work on, I'm going to say something controversial, markets work on greed. Like just putting the elephant in the room there. Greed is not a bad thing. Capitalism has been at the heart of how the country has also moved ahead. And each entrepreneur actually wants to maximize profits. So for a minute, if we were to just accept that and humor me for the next 5 minutes, what is the one Monday morning action? And that Monday could be a little not necessarily next week, but some of it could need some shaping. But I want to ask my August panel, what is that one Monday morning action which could use the power of greed in a good way to actually get the leverage with the government? Which other businesses or opportunities get a 10x leverage off the bat with financial leverage? I'm not even talking of productivity leverage, but in some ways, I think what we're hearing loud and clear, the more it is thought of as charity, the more it's thought of as, look, I am doing good, but not think about the farmer as an entrepreneur, the more it's already doomed for failure. So if I was to take that premise and flip it over, maybe, if we can go in this sequence, Shivani, what might be that one really simple, maybe it's a dream you ever want, what is that one action? And think of an action which potentially may be a little bit distant today, but if together one works together, it could happen. And my only other request is to keep it within like 2 or 3 sentences. Over to you, Shivani.
Yeah, I think 3 actions for me would be, A, to make sure that in our case, because we work with women more than men, would be to make them aware of what are the issues with climate, right? How to recognize the changing patterns in a more structured manner, if I would say, and not be anecdotal. You don't need to feel it or go through it. Like you said that there was a heat wave and 80% of the farmers shifted post that, so can we not have them go through? That's one thing. Second is to make them acquainted with all the government mechanisms, whether it's schemes or departments which work on it. And 3 is encourage them to look at everything to do collectively and not individually.
Thank you.
That's a tough question, and I'll give an answer which will require some, build-up. But I would say, again, start from a consumer perspective and put the fear in our head that nutrition security cannot be taken for granted, and what nutrition security means for us and our family. We will delve down, we'll be forced to look at the farmers and their welfare and force the entire ecosystem, whoever you are, policymakers, government, private sector, because it will become a political, social, economic issue. And and look at food safety, look at sustainable agriculture, because ultimately the consumers will see it from a very selfish greed perspective. To survive, we need to invest in our farmers. And it's not commercial investment only.
Thank you. Thank you. Very powerful. Sejal?
Okay, so I'm going to answer your question indirectly. One of the things we do when we talk about sustainable agriculture is we go down to the ground, we work with farmers on the ground, you mentioned it, work with women, work with marginal farmers, handhold them through the whole process. It's extremely intensive. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and the outcomes, yeah, they are there, but working with 1,000 farmers, working with 2,000 farmers, when the scale of the problem is just stratospheric, it really is a drop in the ocean. And after all that effort, when you actually walk away, because we do, at the end of the day, the development sector, which I come from, we are project bound, and when we walk away, we are actually leaving them possibly worse off than they were before, because we've handhold them to such an extent that they're unable to sustain it when we're gone. So I think we need to change that completely, and we need to look at how do we create that enabling environment. The stuff that we're talking about, create that enabling environment, build the capacities, focus on the bottom of the pyramid, and then let them take over. Let them decide, and whether it's greed that's driving them or whether it's something else that's driving them, it's organic. And you have to leave it at that. And that's where the role of, I think, philanthropies comes in, is how do we finance this kind of approach? It's not financeable at this point in time. What is financeable right now is projects. And unless we move away from that, we are going to be trapped in this cycle of working at a scale which is not commensurate with the scale of the problem.
Thank you. Aparna, last words from you.
I'll keep it very short. There was a number that was put up saying that less than 10% of philanthropy is going into environment and sustainability. If I had a magic wand, I want to see that at least to go up to 20 to 25% very quickly, or more, but very quickly in a measurable way. So I think that's a clarion call for everyone in the room.
In a measurable way, that's the catch.
Thank you. I know I have run over, but this is a fascinating topic. Thank you, my panelists for this, and hopefully some actions will emerge out of this.
While Anant hands over, memento to our panelists, to have a round of applause for the farmer who's taking the risk day in and day out. And, I think the efforts that we have started today will continue, and we look forward to more, conversations and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Romit. Thank you, panelists. Thank you to HSBC for a very, very insightful session. We can talk about this for a long time, but sorry, we have to move on to the next session. I request everyone to please scan the QR code at the back of the agenda to provide your feedback. We would really appreciate that. We will take a quick 5-minute break for some tea, coffee, and come back here for our next session.